Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live. There's also a Ko-fi, Patreon, crypto and thanks button in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching. Then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and X. Now we are joined by Neil, click OK, and a whole bunch of people in the Flat Earth Debate Discord server, so welcome one and all.
Yellow.
Yellow.
How are you?
All right.
Yellow.
Indeed. We were talking about Mike Tyson in the pre-show. Mike Tyson had a little discussion with another, I think he was an MMA fighter, but regardless, a fighter who's winning a lot. And he's asking this particular fighter, do you feel like you're doing well? And he's like, yeah. He's like, do you feel like the Lord's watching over you? And the guy pauses and he's like, yeah, I do. He says, do you feel blessed? He says, yeah, I really do feel blessed and special and all those things. And Tyson says, well, then the devil's watching you too. That was the general sentiment of the pre-show. So if you've just tuned in and you were watching the pre-show up until this point, that will make perfect sense. Lots of Bible verses being quoted back and forth. That's just how it's been on the pre-show. Sometimes it's very Christian in terms of what we do in the pre-show. And today was one of those days. Uplifting it's been. I'll admit, I'm absolutely exhausted. I've only had a couple of hours sleep. So if I start slurring my words, it's not because I'm an alcoholic. I'm not. I don't even drink.
Yeah, you can't get around, talking about the reality we live in and not speaking about the Bible.
But you can say Mike Tyson. You can't get away from Mike Tyson when you're talking about the reality we live in.
Well, Mike Tyson lays it out raw the way it is. There's no, what do you call that? When you just say what you say, there's no filter on Mike Tyson. He just says it like it is, and that's it.
Yeah, it's a nice sentiment. Now, there is a suggestion for a video that we were covering, but I haven't actually heard back from Divergent Droid about the person that wanted to put it out there. I was quite critical of the argument that was going to be suggested to be played out on today's show. And with that in mind, what we will be doing is going through the housekeeping questions and talking about some of the Flat Earth prerequisites that are linked to those questions in a moment. But to give you a general idea of what Divergent Droid had suggested we cover, it was a see too far argument, as in there's an observation from this particular point and in the distance there's an object and we're seeing too much of the object, therefore Earth's flat. That's the general position that's been taken in the argument. And my response was to say, well, if I do cover this, I'm going to be highly critical of that argument, which is to say that on the surface level, it would seem like there's an argument to have when you put it across that at X distance, there should be a geometric physical sphere edge for a horizon obscuring your view of whatever boat building, island, whatever it is that's in the distance. And because we can see the bottom of said island, boat, building, we see, quote, too far, therefore Earth is not a sphere because we see too far, right? Now, 10 years ago, great obvious observation to point out in terms of the limitation to your field of vision at 1.22 times the square root of the observer's measured height off surface level. Flat Earth prerequisite number 1. What about distance to said obstructed item in linear, flat, horizontal miles or kilometres? Another Flat Earth prerequisite that will be used alongside a parallel eye level in Earth curve mathematics to derive a dip angle to the geometric horizon below the surface level you measured for horizontal and linear distance and height perpendicular to a plane of reference. All of which are flat Earth prerequisites you must whistle past to have the "we see too far" argument. Further to that, to say we see too far is a complete misnomer. You don't see too far. The lens limits your view. It doesn't matter if it's your eye or a camera or a telescope. The lens is the limiting factor of how far you will see. So to say we are seeing too far implies that there should be an obstruction at a given distance when you've whistled past the flat Earth prerequisite linear miles or kilometres, perpendicularity when it comes to height off a plane, parallel eye level, all of the things that a flat Earth can only afford you have to be whistled past to have that argument, which is where we get the circumstance where we have a perceived argument about Earth which is measured flat in all circumstances. There isn't an argument. Earth's just measured flat. Even when you think you're on a ball and want to suggest that there's a limitation to your view, or if you're a flat earther falling victim to the notion that we can assert flat Earth, perpendicularity, horizontal distance and parallel eye level to suggest that there's a limitation to our view at 1.22 times the square root of the observer's measured height of a flat Earth. Ludicrous. We shouldn't be doing that anymore as flat earthers. Just know where all measurements of Earth are flat, even if you're going to assert there's a limitation to your view in Earth curve mathematics. That's Earth curve mathematics when utilised by a ball believer, will require Earth be measured flat to assert the linear horizontal distance in kilometres or metres and the height off surface level. All of which are flat Earth prerequisites. Once you establish them as flat Earth prerequisites, you don't need to have the argument. You don't need to point out how far we see or what the limitations suggested to be in an Earth curve maths that measures Earth flat, because it measures Earth flat. That was the first housekeeping question dealt with, but I'll do it after the fact. So any evidence of a physical geometric sphere edge for a horizon, flat Earth prerequisites, the three that I just went through, are the upshot that you as a flat earther, if you are listening to this, should take on board if you hear an assertion that there is a limitation to your view at 1.22 times the square root of the observer's height in feet as laid down in the, begging the question, proof of nothing, perspective hijacking Earth curve calculator. Rather than arguing about where the limitation to the view is, and then have your opponent take you to refraction, point out that to have this discussion in the first place, that's the person putting the Earth curve maths to you in this format, must accept a flat Earth prerequisite linear horizontal distance measurement, or parallel height off surface level, perpendicular height off surface level, or parallel eye level, if I can get the order correct. So don't have the argument. You understand, ball believer, that we will measure Earth flat to have this discussion of where the claim to be limitation of a geometric sphere edge below surface level will be. Well, we'll need a surface level, we'll need a parallel eye level, and we'll need to measure our height perpendicular to a plane of reference. That's 3 flat Earth measurements that we must make to use Earth curve maths. So we don't need Earth curve maths, we need to measure Earth flat. That's the only measurements that are going to take place. All measurements of Earth are flat, even if you want to assert Earth curve mathematics. You still need to measure Earth flat. At which point, your opponent, the ball believer, will either do one of two things. Number 1, sink to his knees, or hers, in acknowledgement of the flat Earth we must measure to utilise Earth curve mathematics. At which point you've measured Earth flat and that's the end of the discussion. Earth's measured flat. Or they can relinquish their measurements of Earth and its surface level, parallel eye level and perpendicularity for height above surface level, and say that no, we don't have a parallel eye level and surface level, in which case they can't functionally utilise their own mathematics. And they haven't got any measurements anymore. That's called the hard place. The rock being an acceptance of the flat Earth prerequisite elevation angle, eye level and surface level that will and can only be measured. Earth is measured flat. We checked. Even for Earth curve maths.
Exactly, Nathan.
Unless you measure it locally 1,000 times flat and then come around and claim the Earth is a ball.
Like Simon Dan, you mean?
Yeah.
That's got to sting, right? Having us discuss how Simon Dan measured Earth flat and has to, as a result, quote Simon Dan, We don't only measure Earth flat, end quote, Simon Dan. Why would he say such a thing? Because he's measuring Earth flat 1,000 times and needs to explain and apologise why he's measuring Earth flat 1,000 times. So we don't only measure Earth flat? Well, actually we do only measure Earth flat. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go through each of the housekeeping questions and point out where the flat Earth prerequisite resides in each of those questions. We did do some of this yesterday, but we were like we just did now, and I said we wouldn't, linking it to people like Simon Dan. I just want to link it to the general argument today. I mean, I'm not going to stop you if you link it to Simon Dan or, you know, Dave McKeegan measuring the Earth flat for a 24-hour period in Antarctica. I keep forgetting Simon Dan and both Dave did measure Earth flat with elevation angles, but Dave Fugly McKeegan couldn't quite cope with his own tripod. But for the fact that he was outsmarted by his own tripod, Dave McKeegan would have measured Earth flat for a 24-hour period. I just keep forgetting that he couldn't quite cope with his own equipment. My bad. So, with yesterday's show, we covered gravity in terms of the easy to debunk conceptual fourth-dimensional space-time medium not having a phenomena to study. But today I want to focus on, with gravity at least, the taught to kids in school downward vector perpendicular to a plane gravity that asserts there's an always in effect force of down, ignoring the fact that gas comes out of the ground and goes up in defiance of mass attracting mass, as is taught to school children. But to assert this downward vector, they're using one of the words that you're not allowed to use if you're a ball believer. You don't have down on a ball. That's perpendicular to a plane of reference at 90 degrees to horizontal. That's what a downward vector is. So Newtonian gravity, if you're going to assert it, requires a plane of reference. Don't get down on a ball.
Well, again, Nathan, even if she was on that subject with somebody, yeah, you do need down is you'll need a horizontal reference frame for down. They're presuming that things are being dragged into the centre of the core of the Earth because it's a sphere. So then you can automatically just get onto the subject. Well, let's establish how that sphere was measured. It'll always come back to that in any of the questions that you're going to ask, because it's always a presupposition of a globe. So let's get that out of the way. How was your globe measured? And then you'll soon find out that it was measured flat.
Greeks all knew that.
Yeah, they did exactly what Simon Dan Tosthenes did and measured angles using sticks and shadows. I mean, it has to be flat horizontal shadows, obviously.
No, went down well in the comment section of yesterday's video. Al-Baruhif.
Did it? Yeah. Brilliant.
Al-Baruhif. Yeah, very funny. Just out of interest. How's that geometric horizon working out for you, Rufy? Good? Working out well? Oh, we do have a laugh. We've done flat Earth prerequisites in the form of the Earth curve mathematics, and we've done Newtonian downward vectors perpendicular to a plane of reference. What should we do next? Let's go through all of the housekeeping questions and talk about the flat Earth prerequisites that are required for each. There is one. Maybe we'll do the one that I've immediately sprung to mind as perhaps not having one, because it bases itself, the question that is, on the presuppositional ball Earth being in effect. So any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a said presupposed spherical Earth. I've said it and immediately one deck's already answered this 25 seconds ago, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, you're saying there's a molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
Well, I'm asking if there's any evidence, but yes.
Well, you'll need evidence of the globe first. Have you got any?
Well, in order to create a globe to believe in, I'd need to measure a flat Earth to derive a radial value. So my globe will be measured flat to put it into presuppositional effect by bastardizing the flat Earth measurement that derives the radial value that gets made spherical. And if you suggest that you're on that surface spherically, you're violating the base principle measurement that created that spherical surface mathematically. So you're going to need a flat Earth to suggest there's a molten iron core to beg the question of a globe Earth with a molten iron core. So fortunately for me, when it popped into my head as being one that doesn't need a presuppositional or prerequisite flat Earth measurement, it absolutely does. Any ball prerequisite, as you point out, requires you measure Earth flat one deck.
Exactly. You can always bring it back to that point. And this is what I was saying to the guys yesterday, where we was talking about knowing the argument of the heliocentric model, which we've never seen, and knowing each side of the story, inside out. But I find myself, if I get into the wrangle-tangle of talking about gravity or molten iron cores or orbital motions, I automatically just go straight down to this situation. What we're talking about is, well, okay, you live on a globe, you're stating you live on a globe. Let's talk about who measured it, when it was measured, and what equipment was used. Let's just get that out the way. Then once we've got the globe evidence, then we can start talking about all the other things attached to it. But that's what we need first, the globe Earth measurements, which you'll find out will be flat Earth measurements. Then that just wipes everything else out the window attached to the globe.
Yeah, as soon as you get to the nitty-gritty of how the actual surface of Earth gets measured, flat for all measurements, you're then into the rock and the hard place, not debating about whether or not there's a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the said centre of the said presupposed spherical Earth that you'll have to measure flat to create. You just at the rock where you measure Earth flat to create it, or deny the measurements, aka hard place, at which point your opponent's either got to accept that you're measuring Earth flat to create the ball, to have the presupposition. Do you remember back in the day when we praised the fact that we managed to get Mick West to admit that the R value is presupposed? Well, in reality, having us stop at the point of presupposition and just say, well, you lose because it's a fallacy to presuppose your radial value, was actually, as weird as it is to say this now, 7 or 8 or 9 years later, that actually worked to their advantage. No wonder Mick West was happy to concede that, yeah, we assume radial value. Yes, it's a presupposition, but that's just us pointing out fallacy as opposed to pointing out how that presupposition actually comes to fruition. Measuring Earth flat.
Yeah, but their pre-assumption is a calculation, not a pre-assumption.
Yes, that's where I was going next.
That is derived from measurements of a flat plane. So they need a geometry that's 180 degrees opposite from the geometry they then need to claim.
Or to put it another way, you need the actual measurements of Earth's flat surface to be able to be back calculated into the ball when you're asserting the ball is being utilised functionally. It isn't, but it must, quote unquote, work with the real measurements. Right, Brian?
Well, when they say real measurements, there's no weather types. Is there a different one from real? It's just measurements. So I don't know how to respond to that.
I'm saying that when you suggest
all measurements are real.
And what I mean is when you describe ball Earth calculations, then those must function with the actual real world measurements, and they are the flat measurements of Earth's surface that I've just described as being back calculatable when you infer from the outset that the ball is what we use in its origin. We use flat Earth measurements, but they must function with their calculated ball.
Well, the actual measurements of the measurements of Earth have been used in a massive gaslighting scandal. That's the actual best way to put it. You know, how Earth is measured has been used in a massive gaslighting scandal. If you want to get the absolute truth, it's a psychological operation.
With a massive
that
black
is
hole.
Not the answer you're looking for there now.
No, it is the answer I'm looking for, because it ties directly into what you were telling us yesterday when we were chatting about NASA.
Well, yeah, I mean, to calculate a globe right into existence mathematically, like they have, they needed to first of all, measure the Earth and measure it to enough of an accuracy that they could then use those measurements or hijack them and create a globe out of those measurements by appealing to people's ignorance in one way, but also with repetition. It's also a willpower thing. Is that they want to, through willpower, somehow gaslight you into thinking that you live right on an Earth that is 180 degrees opposite from the reality you experience. And they've done a very, very good job of that.
It's inversion. That's satanic.
Well, it's manipulative, that's for sure.
Making black seem like white and front seem like back, and this inversion, this inverted world that we live on, if we suggest sphericity, is a satanic inversion of the reality as you've just described it. Now, you might not like me directly tying it to Satan, but I'll tie it back to NASA instead.
But it is.
I just don't want to necessarily label that point live.
You can describe it any way you like.
Yeah. In reality, the thing I want to get back to, which is what I suggested initially, was what you were talking about with NASA, because it's quite profound how you described it to me yesterday. I don't think it was on one of the shows. I think it was one of the phone calls we were having. But you were saying there's this enormous black hole of money that is NASA. And when anybody's attacking this subject matter from the perspective of, in our case, flat Earth measurements, we've almost shied away from it because it's almost inconsequential when you talk about the sky vacuum, which we'll get to shortly. But as you just put it, Brian, it's the biggest psyop in existence. It's the biggest black hole of money in existence, and it's been going for a huge amount of time. So if the world found out, what would be the consequences? I'm trying to lead you in a way that I can't get to a point where I'm leading you well.
No, I know where you're going. I'll help you out with it. Yeah, I know. I don't mean that in a smart way. I'm just saying that. Yeah, I understand where you're going. Well, let's just start with the Earth itself, right? Is there any part of the heliocentric globe paradigm that doesn't lend itself to being the complete opposite to what we actually experience? No. Every single part of it is the complete opposite to what we actually experience. But we're told that that is the truth, that we think and pre-assume through experience that we're living on a flat stationary plane, when really we're living on a rotating sphere, right? We think that the celestial bodies are moving when it's actually they're stationary and we're moving, with the exception of the moon in their paradigm. So this is what they use. So they have you psychologically from birth, because it doesn't matter if you have a mobile, someone has a mobile above their cot of the stars and the moon and all, the sun, like Chocolate said he had as a kid, and many people have had. That doesn't matter whether you have that or not, because you're growing up in a world that is constantly indoctrinating itself, and everyone's indoctrinating everyone else. So I'm indoctrinating you, Nathan, when I call up your house and start talking to you about something that's happening out in aerospace, heliocentric aerospace, and you're indoctrinating me when you're telling me about some movie that's coming out and it's taking place on Mars or whatever, right? So this is all it's like a completely repetitive indoctrination of each other, as well as the overlord indoctrination that we deal with. Now, at the root of all that, if we get down to the brass tacks of rather than where it originated from, so let's ignore Kepler on that for the minute. We have a situation where we have an institution in the United States now, and they're all across the world, but they're in the United States. They're called NASA. Now, I remember hearing 10 years ago that they were getting $50 million a day, right? And that they used to get more, supposedly, back in from the 60s to the 80s. Now, if you go back to when NASA first formed, and you think about the amount of money that's been funneled into NASA, we're going back now to when John F. Kennedy was the president of the United States. So that's way back in the 60s. late 50s into early 60s, right? If you take that, right, that time frame right up to now, let's just say we'll go from 60, let's say 60, 1960, 1970, 1980, 1990, 2000, 2010, 2020. You're talking 65 years that NASA have had money put into them basically on a daily or weekly basis. Now, besides all the operations that go on in NASA, all the people they pay like as employees and all their whatever. I know they have to pay for all these things that they do, right? All these kind of everyday tasks or whatever they're building or whatever, and they might send a few rockets up into the air, right? Band, right? Big, huge scene, brilliant, right? Over the decades. But outside of that, all they've ever given, right, was mock-ups and CGI, right? That's all they've ever given the world. So how much of that money that they get on a daily basis for 65 years possibly now, right? You could say safely 60 years, but you could say 65 considering John F. Kennedy was talking about them in 1963 and prior, and talking about them going to the moon, which they claimed to do in 1969. How much of that money went to other places? Because it didn't go into spaceships going to heliocentric outer space. So technically, and this was my point yesterday, when people in the US complain about the money that's going to countries like Israel or the Ukraine, right, and how they're black holes where the money is being used incorrectly, or it's been, with like the likes of the Ukraine, it was shown to be basically a scam where a lot of that money was coming back to the US, but it was coming back to more private accounts or whatever, right? So it was just money laundering kind of thing. How much money has been laundered, right, and passed through the filter of NASA's financial black hole? I mean, like Israel, whatever money goes from the US to Israel or goes from the US to the Ukraine or to the Contras or whatever over the decades, it is absolutely pennies. It's a nothing in comparison to NASA. The amount of money that's gone into NASA and especially in recent years, because in the past 10 years, NASA is going to step back. The likes of Elon Musk and the Amazon guy, what's his name, Jeff Bezos, have stepped forward with their SpaceX and their Blue Origin and all this. And even what's his name with Virgin Media, right, has stepped forward, and they're kind of pushing their space stuff now. And you've China, Branson stuff. China is doing a bit of space stuff in Japan and God knows what. But it's in the end of the day, nothing compares to NASA as a black hole of money. So how much money has been laundered through NASA? How much money has gone into NASA but actually gone other places, whether it be private accounts, whether it be black operations, God knows what, right? What they've done with it. But it's certainly not going to build rockets and spacecraft to go off out into heliocentric outer space, which is a violation of entropy. You know what I mean? That's not happening. So if we're far more dangerous than we realize. Even though it's everyday stuff for us, arguing with the borders, people in Discord, blah, 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 on YouTube, X, whatever, TikTok, we don't realize that what we could cause as an undercovering could be let's say, shining a massive light onto NASA's financial situation. And if America, the American people, besides all the other facets of uproar what happened in the world, if they all actually realized and accepted that they were all being duped for decades, for hundreds of years at this stage with the globe, but that NASA have been continually taking money from the American taxpayer. And what are they giving them in recent years? In recent years, the best that NASA has given is reasonably okay, you know what I mean, AI or CGI. So where's all that money gone to? Where's it gone to? Do you know what I mean? Someone has it, it's gone somewhere, and it's certainly not gone into space missions. Besides the old rocket they might have built.
Did you look behind the fridge?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Brian.
But it's true.
Brian, they did develop memory foam in the 60s.
Microwaves, Velcro.
Yeah, Velcro. Yeah. See, this is the thing. What has NASA? It's a bit like the joke in the movie Life of Brian. What has NASA ever actually done for us?
The aqueduct.
The aqueduct. Yeah. Basically, NASA have done nothing. What have they done for the people of America outside of giving them false hope and false belief that they were after conquering some great feat by going to the moon, which they didn't do?
I did see a dude with a beard singing.
That's why we're public enemy number one.
I saw a dude with a like guitar strumming the Bowie song. Ground control to Major Tom. Remember that? They gave us that, didn't they? That was pretty good.
The ISS.
The ISS, yeah, you got it.
And scratch-resistant glasses.
Yeah, but that's not about space. That's about a junkie. We know Major Tom's a junkie.
But,
what do you mean Major Tom's a junkie? Next thing
have,
you'll be telling me is Puff the Magic Dragon's got something to do with anything other than dragons.
What NASA have given us, what they have given us is a very nice story, isn't it? And what they have done, technically, if you want to get technical about it, besides financial things, what they've actually done is completely opposed Albert Einstein. Completely opposed general relativity. Completely. So, and NASA are in direct opposition to Albert Einstein, general and special and general relativity. Because they show what could only be described as some depiction of a force of gravity that was thrown out the window in 1915 when Albert Einstein's, not exactly in 19, but once his general relativity came out, it took a while for people to come around to it. But, they threw that out. Any Newtonian, incorrectly named Newtonian force of gravity, because I don't want to give that to Newton because he denied it. Any incorrectly claimed Newtonian force of gravity was thrown out the window. Yet, right, 54 years later, that's 1915 to 1969, 54 years later, I think it is, NASA bring it back to come back. Do you know what I mean? It's like, do you know what I mean? It's like, that force of gravity is back. And ever since, they've been teaching that gravity is two things, and now three things or four things, over to people in colleges and schools and high schools and universities for decades now. So nobody knows what the hell it is because they keep teaching people different things.
Well, I mentioned Anthony Riley in the pre-show before you got here, I think, Brian, and that was one of the things that he actually did. He went to the education minister here in the UK. I think he went all the way up to the Prime Minister, actually. He was pushing it through because there was something going through the Education Reform Act or something like that, and it was an in for him to start pointing out that there's an out-of-date, 100 and almost 11 years out of date, Newtonian, down with a respect to a plane of reference perpendicular to it, force of gravity that is not real. It's been superseded by Einsteinian bending pseudo-Riemannian fourth-dimensional space-time. Now, bearing in mind that this is Anthony Riley, a flat earther through and through, appealing to a government minister to just be up to date with their own heliocentric rhetoric. He's not even saying, look, Earth's flat, there is no gravity, there's no downward bias, and conceptual time bendings are nonsense. That's not what he was doing. He was saying, why are you, the government, approving the education of small children with a out-of-date, 110-year, at the time it was 108 years out of date, force, which it's not, of gravity, when there's a superseded version, or it has been superseded by a different version, by Einstein? Why aren't you teaching kids what it really is in your own rhetoric, which he didn't add? He's not trying to bias his own attempt to get the education to be reformed with the actual heliocentric rhetoric of bent spacetime. Now, did he get anywhere? No. But it's pretty egregious when you've got kids being lied to, and it's not just a lie about heliocentrism, it's a lie within a lie, because it's not downward vectors with respect to a plane anymore. There is no force of gravity. The idea that mass attracts mass was superseded by bent space-time and is defied by gas behaviour. Gas fills space. It comes out of the ground and goes away from it. It's not attracted by the mass of Earth. It's nonsense. Hence, they supersede it. But as Brian points out, they're on a bit of a sticky wicket when they're describing and demonstrating Newtonian gravity on a claim to be surface of the moon after travelling through a second law of thermodynamics violation sky vacuum.
Well, the thing is, they can't throw it out. And this is what I said back in 2019 when I first said it. That they can't throw that out the window. They can't throw out the claimed force of gravity right out the window. And to support that, so people know, before Anthony did that, there was a guy that I came across online, and would you believe I can't find the guy again. I can't find the articles about the guy.
Did you look behind the fridge?
Sorry?
Did you look behind the fridge?
No. It's always in the last place you look. But no, this guy
Let's stop rumpusing. I've done it. I get away with it. You don't. Go ahead, Brian.
Yes, this guy is an astrophysicist. He's an English lad, and he's an astrophysicist. And I think he teaches at a university, or he works at a university or something like that in the UK, somewhere in the UK. But he was going around primary schools, which would be junior schools or whatever in the US, and trying to teach the kids that when they hear that gravity is this force of attraction between, like, what they term as two masses, right? That it's not. And he was trying to teach them that it's general relativity. And he tried to get, this guy was trying at the time, a kind of a revolution within the education system in the UK to be correct, right? That was old and busted and it was gone, right? They don't, because he's an astrophysicist, so he's talking about special and general relativity. And now they're on to quantum gravity and whatever other nonsense. But the point is that he knew that what the incorrectly termed Newtonian force of gravity is all and busted. He didn't get anywhere either, obviously. And the reason he didn't is because, as I said several years ago, I think it was 2019 when I first said it, that they can't allow that in. They can't, recognize that there is no force of gravity, because then it's obvious that the moon landings didn't happen. Because what they're showing in the moon landings and every other piece of claimed astronauts in space footage from the ISS and every other claimed space agency, that what they're showing is people with under a lesser influence of a force of gravity. So they are on the moon, the gravitational attraction to the center of the moon, based off of its heliocentric size, is less than on the globe Earth. So the astronauts weighed less. Same claimed mass, right, whatever that is, but their weight was less. They cannot allow people like this guy or Anthony to tell the truth, right? This is the ironic thing. They can't even allow the truth of their own paradigm to be mainstay, because they have to lie within their own paradigm to keep their own paradigm on the tracks. Because if they don't, the moon landings are over. It'll be obvious that the whole thing was a fraud and is a fraud up to today. Because right now, today, you can probably go on a live stream and you'll be told you're on a part of a live stream coming straight from the ISS, and there's all these people floating around because there's less gravitational force that doesn't exist in their paradigm. So they can't.
So we need more people.
It's also in the science museums. So if you go to, this is going back a while, but with group, it's Sun and Moon or something group, a whole bunch of us went to the Space Center. I can't remember where it is now. It's going back so many years. But one of the exhibits that they had was to show all of the different forces of gravity on the different planets. And they had it demonstrated with a bean tin, like a baked bean tin. And for you guys in the States, you probably don't have baked beans, just a can, like a tin can. And let's just say peaches rather than beans, so it's easier to imagine. But you've got your tin of peaches, and then it says, this is how much it would weigh on Earth. And you pick it up and you're like, yeah, that feels like a can of peaches. And then you go, this is how it would feel on Mars. And you pick it up and you go, oh, that's really light. And then as you go along all the planets, it's showing the demonstrated downward perpendicularity to a plane of reference force of Newtonian gravity. So this all has to get kicked out the window. And as Brian's correctly pointed out and identified, you can't.
So you were being indoctrinated when you go to these places and you're picking up a can of peaches that's so light. So but what if more people like Anthony Riley and this guy that you can't find anymore, Brian, started putting pressure on these schools
Wouldn't make any
and
difference.
the school and the education system?
But it's the incest that they have to pretend didn't happen. What I mean?
The incest, did you say? Incest?
Yeah, incest.
You know what incest means?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
That's but you don't understand what I mean. Within their paradigm, they have to pretend that this didn't happen. As in general relativity didn't, right, completely replace all of the incorrectly termed Newtonian force of gravity. Right? They have to pretend that didn't happen. So that's like the incest that they're pretending never took place.
Not only that, though, Brian, that's a good point you made. It's, you know, they can't let that go because it'll reveal them. But in the same note, that will also reveal how the claim of Newtonian gravity could have never been put through the scientific method in the first place. And then you can move on to that. Kids aren't being taught the correct scientific method.
But
Yeah.
you could. There was a claim. Now I don't believe this, right? I stopped believing this a long time back, I think. But there's a claim that an apple fell onto Isaac Newton's head. So that's a naturally observed effect. Apple falls from tree. You can test that and see, right, if the apple will always go down, right? And in different mediums. And you'll find it won't. You'll find in the medium of water, it'll go up. So they could have tested this, right, through scientific method, and they could have disproved that their claimed force was actually real at all. Which is why one day they had to hijack buoyancy, which is 1900 years before even the birth of Isaac Newton. Why did they need to hijack Archimedes and the Archimedes principle? Because that's the thing that debunked their claimed force. So suddenly, Archimedes' principle is all due to the force of down. That's why things go up.
You'll need a planar reference for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, down, up. If the apple's rising up through a lake, so they flood an area. I'm just trying to think of a scenario where an apple tree's underwater. They flood an area and the apple comes off the tree because it's been flooded and goes up. Well, up is a direction with respect to a plane of reference. If it's falling off the tree in air, it's moving down with respect to a plane of reference. In other words, these all require a plane of reference. If you get into argumentation from a flat earth perspective, I mean, about this, I just wanted to wait right till the very end so I didn't get your goat, Brian, because I've done it so many times in the past. Interrupt halfway through the actual example you're making to point out a plane of reference.
Yeah, but it's a bit of a sidebar. I mean, it's a bit of a red herring. It's true from a geometric point of view, it's true. But, and yeah, down and up are in reference to a horizontal plane of reference. That's true, 100%. But for me, what I would focus, up to you, you do whatever you want, it's your show. But I would only focus on the fact that the down force doesn't happen to the apple in water. So that means there isn't a force of constant down. Do you know what I mean?
Almost a verbatim quote from Cox. Sorry, just drop it in while it's still pertinent. Sorry, just one sec. It was just you said almost a direct verbatim quote from Cox, which was, "There isn't really a force of gravity at all." End quote, Professor Brian Cox.
Yes, because the apple isn't being pulled towards the center of the sphere. Because we're not on one. That's simple.
Well, you need some measurements for that.
Well, yeah, but
Here we go. Measurements.
You're missing the point. You're going to think the red herrings. It's not the time for the red herrings.
Yeah,
Right?
one deck.
In a way, even if it's correct, it's a red herring, right? Because in the end of the day, right, if the apple is not going down in water, that means there isn't a constant force of down pulling the apple down towards the center of the globe Earth. That means they don't have the needed force that they need to claim right, is keeping everything attached to a rotating sphere in a vacuum, including air. So that all goes out the window. Now they don't have that. Now that's another reason why they don't want to throw it out, besides the NASA reason, which is just a more obvious reason. This is a secondary reason that's far more damning, but it's not as obvious as the NASA reason. The point being is that if things are not being pulled down by a force, and they're not, right, then they're not being pulled towards the center of the globe, which means the same of a heliocentric globe Earth rotating and orbiting in a vacuum with an air pressure around it, they call an atmosphere, is all directly thrown out the window.
Yeah,
you don't even need to talk about the geometry of whether they have a measurement for this globe. If they require the force for the globe, the force they had to throw out that didn't work for them as they expanded their heliocentric style universe. They had to throw it all out the window.
Yeah,
they don't want to talk about it.
The hypothesis was incorrect, and they didn't follow the scientific method through correctly, was my point.
What hypothesis? What hypothesis?
That everything is being pulled down to the centre of Earth. The apple was being put, like you've just explained, Brian.
Yeah, but they didn't even have a hypothesis. That's just a straight claim. This is the thing. They didn't test to see if that was happening. That's just a claim they have.
Yeah, that's my point.
I mean, yeah.
Go on, Wadek.
I'm saying that's the point I'm making.
Yeah, but I have to be anal about this, right? A claim of a force and a hypothesis that involves the pre-assumption of a possible force is two different things. Because the hypothesis would be the testing of the pre-assumption, right? I think there could be a force pulling the apple down. That's why it's going down, right? That would be a testing of it. That is what they're doing, is ignoring all testing of their ideas, right, or their pre-assumptions, and just going with them. Do you know what I mean? They're just running with it. You know, that's why they keep on having to change their paradigm constantly, because they just run with things. And when something ends up running into a brick wall, they just come up with a new thing and they run with that. They don't test anything. So from a scientific point of view, if you're talking about, you know, something like a force of gravity claim, where why is the apple going down? Right? They may not find out why the apple is going down through air, as in they may not be able to say any more than, well, it's just a density differential issue, which brings them back to buoyancy. But they can say that there definitely isn't a force, because if there was, it wouldn't go up in water. That would be the truth if they were honest people actually doing science, natural science. That would be the truth. But they're not honest.
Credit where credit's due to people smarter than myself, which is specifically Dr. John D. I think Refracted Curvature might have been part of the group. Adam Meaking, Quantum Eraser. We're all discussing this 2-3 years ago, and it was a week-long discussion to come to the conclusion that it's a second-order effect of entropy.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean anything to me. I've heard
it's just a description.
It's
not. I'm not going to undermine your point. You're saying there's no scientific validity offered to it, but in terms of the description of it, the description, which is all it is just a second-order effect of entropic effects.
Yeah, but that's just a load of description. What is it?
You describing a gravity effect, i.e. something falling to the ground in this instance. Why does stuff fall?
Yeah, we don't know. We just know that stuff goes down and stuff goes up. If the density of the thing, the substance or the object is more dense than the medium, it goes down. If the density of the substance or object is less dense than the medium, it goes up. Yeah, that's all we know.
Which
There's
is a great
point trying to add it, you know.
Well, it's a great description, and you're right. When I say it's a second-order effect of entropy, what I mean is it's a folly to try and validate this scientifically. You're never going to get to the cause of entropy, so therefore a second-order effect of entropy. Same thing applies. When you go back to the first order, that's the description only of entropy. That's not telling you what caused it.
Yeah, but even to say, why do things not go sideways? Why do they go down?
Yeah, I don't care what they say. No offense. But a second order effect of entropy is only a description.
Yes, exactly.
All we can do is describe it. So saying that always never sat with me. How the whole second order effect of entropy never sat with me, because it's like, well, the second order effect of a description? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
No. It's one of the things, we don't know why it happens, but we do know that it's not because of some force pulling it to the center of a sphere out of radius 3.959 miles.
Exactly. That's my point as well.
Indeedy widdy.
Anyway, I shut off for a few minutes because I'm sure
Yeah,
you're
I
on
don't
someone's
care.
nerve. Yeah.
Yeah, you already got on my nerves.
What?
You deserve it.
Oh, you
No,
just...
I don't. When I add something, I don't expect to be shot down like that.
Oh, get over yourself. It's all good.
What did you add?
You don't even know, but you shot it right down. Fucking
you're
tired.
sideways. Why isn't it going sideways? I don't. That's not an adding. That's I don't care about that. I've heard about it. Why isn't it going sideways? I've heard that a billion times. It's a red herring away from the fact that the force that they need doesn't exist. That's what that is. If you want me to actually address it.
He's dropped. He's either lost his internet connection or got irritated with the saying, get over yourself.
He's after dropping, I would say, because he's irritated. Yeah, he's angry. I'm not going to address him telling me why isn't it going sideways? Why is he asking me that? That leaves some baller asked that. Why is he asking me
that's
that?
what he's doing. He's playing devil's advocate. Neil does it really well.
Yeah, but okay. But do
I can hear you in your voice. There's a time and a place. I appreciate why you're being annoyed.
Should I stop in the middle of what I was saying to address this complete and utter horse manure that I've heard a million times?
No.
This red herring? Yeah.
No, fair enough. I totally understand your frustration. It is during the description of red herring. But what Neil's trying to emphasise is that you put this across to your average Joe Normie, and Neil's playing that devil's advocate position when you go through it in as concise a manner as you do, you get instantly undermined by some dick saying, what about things going sideways? Why don't they? And you're like, that's a complete red herring. You haven't acknowledged a single smegging word that I've just gone through.
Yeah, and when a bowler does it, fair enough, right? They're a bowler. But I'd rather Neil wasn't doing it and flat outers weren't doing it. I'm aware of that. I don't need to be right. I don't need it to be reiterated to me again by someone on my own side.
Fair enough. Well, I appreciate what Neil does, but obviously in this particular circumstances you don't, which is fine. I think One Deck made a very good point. Thank you, One Deck.
That's not what I was saying.
Go ahead, Neil. Oh, has Neil got an audio issue? We can't hear you, Neil.
You didn't allow me to finish. You just jumped right down my throat.
Okay, finish, and then I jumped in your throat after that.
Down your throat.
When ball is coming, I'm trying to get on your point that we don't know why things go down, but we do know they go down. Now, if you come back and say, well, why don't things go sideways? We don't know, but we do know that they go down.
Do they? Looks up at clouds.
That's a...
Just want to counteract your straight off the bat. First of all, as much as it's going to annoy Brian, because it undermines his overall overarching point, you're going to need a planar reference for that downward vector. But things don't all go down. Looks up at clouds. Sorry to do it, Brian. I had to do it. Sorry. Go ahead.
The things that do go down.
Yeah, but that's not their claim to you. Their claim is all things go down when they don't. And because they don't, they say, well, the things that don't go down, the things that go up, that's because of buoyancy, which is caused by a force of gravity. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I understand.
I'm fully aware of their position. And what your point, there's nothing wrong with it, but in the middle of the flow I have going on, that doesn't help matters.
Oh, my God. Really, Brian?
Yeah, He
Yeah,
told me off
really.
enough. I'm going to back Brian up. I'm sorry to do it to you, Neil. Yeah, he's told me off enough for me to know when I'm going to tick him off by doing it. So, yeah, I've got to back up Brian in this regard. Sorry. There's a time and a place.
I like the sound of my own voice sometimes, Dean.
That's not what I meant.
To interrupt it.
That's not what I meant.
Sound your voice a lot. You didn't let me
Sorry,
finish.
say that.
You said not going to let me finish, so I guess that's it. Okay.
I thought you had done. I thought you had finished. Okay. I'll go quiet.
Had you finished? I thought you had too, Neil. Clearly you have. In either event, I thought we'd get through almost all of the housekeeping questions today, but we haven't. We've focused mainly on gravity, which is fine, absolutely fine. I like the fact that early on we got the flat Earth prerequisite in before it could annoy Brian, and I've dropped it in a couple of times in between so people understand the plane of reference that is required. But ultimately, the bit that I was hoping we did focus on after we'd gone through the housekeeping questions, which we haven't done in the entirety of the focusing on prerequisites that are needed from a flat Earth to assert the housekeeping questions as an opponent to flat Earth debate, was NASA and the black hole and the fact that we have this absolutely enormous psyop. So in the past, I've given short shrift to Brian when he said it's the most important thing in the whole wide world because it's this massive black hole, and I've gone yeah, and kind of not given it the credence that it deserves. And the more Brian says it, the more it resonates with me. It's like, no, it is the most important thing. Everything else is a sideline to this particular deception, the heliocentric deception. Because it's a kind of, am I making myself more grandiose than I necessarily need to be when I say it's the most important thing in the whole wide world because it's the thing I cover as my subject focus? Therefore, am I just overindulging my own ego when I say it's the most important thing? But the more Brian says it, the more I think, well, no, you're right. In terms of what actually affects people on a day-to-day basis, the systems of control that are in place, the money that's poured into it, the deceit level, all of it is absolutely off the charts, isn't it?
Yeah, if you look, let's take a timeline here. If you go back to 2019, we were all talking about the fact that the Earth's not a globe, that it's flat and stationary, right? And there was different things turning up that people could say, well, what about this thing that's happening in politics, or that thing that's happening? What about this? What about the woke agenda, whatever? Then you have in 2020, you have COVID comes along. And then nobody cares what you're saying about the Earth. That's not important. What's important is what they're doing now with COVID, right? Then COVID went away, right? Then the Ukraine war turned up. The Ukraine-Russia war turned up, right? And you mentioned flat Earth, and everyone goes, never mind all that. There's serious stuff happening in the world, right? There's a war in Ukraine, and there's this, that, and everything happening. And in the meantime of all that, there was a big situation happen with Gaza, right? I think the West Bank back in 2021. Now you had the Gaza situation, and I'm not belittling any of these things, right? But you had the Gaza situation happening again, and all this stuff that's happening in and around the Palestine right, area, and has been happening since the 1940s, right? And there's been waves of it on and off, and it's a continual thing going on, right? I'm not going to go into it here now, right? My position. But yeah, but the point being is that I'm not belittling the importance of all these things. But while all those things are happening, in the background, you're being told you're on a rotating globe in a vacuum, right? So something comes along, and like recently, in recent days, there's been a supposed ceasefire happening in Gaza, right? Right between the IDF and the Hamas and whatever, right? And there's all this stuff going on, right? So now that'll, for a while, die down a bit, and it'll come back again, but it'll die down a bit. And there'll be something else come along. But there's always some other thing that the world is told is really important. And it is important, these things. There's no doubt about it, that all the people that are dying in these wars and the big deception that happened with the whole virus thing and all that for a few years there, that's all important. But all these things come along and then they go away or they die out and come back, whichever. The point is that all that time, you've all been told you're on a rotating globe in a vacuum. This is the head of the snake. There is no other, and this is why the only thing I'm interested in this is in this. You cannot deal with the snake by sticking pins in its side. The head of the snake is what you need to cut off. and then the snake is no more.
Perfect.
Unless you
So
do
are
that,
all these
and
things
do it correctly.
distractions?
I'm not saying they're intentional distractions, but you
They could be,
bring up
though.
this. Well, they don't know that the issues happen in the world, right? And the fact that maybe some of these issues are down to the fact that a lot of people just believe they're living on a rotating globe, and that whatever psychology is inbuilt in them because of that may have some knock-on effect, right? Because there's a nihilism effect, and maybe people are willing to do things in wars and get involved in wars because there is a certain amount of nihilism in the world. But the point I'm making is, in the end of the day, there's a main background manipulation going on at all times. And when you try and bring it up, there's always when you try and bring it up to the public, there's always some other thing that you'll be told is more important. Never mind all that stuff, this is the important thing. Never mind all that stuff, this is the important thing.
I think you're onto something.
But
Yes.
that's what you can. Go on, yeah, sorry, I said it.
I'm just agreeing. He said, I think you're onto something. And I'm saying, I'm leaning into that. I'm going, yeah, because I gave you short shrift in the past when you've said this, because I feel like I'm over-aggrandizing my position in this debate, which it isn't anymore. But I think you're right, and I'm agreeing with Neil. And I'm like, yeah, he is right. It's a huge deal.
It's like, how do you deceive somebody, right? You tell them, watch the hand over here while something else is going on over there.
Exactly.
That's what it sounds like to me.
Exactly. Don't look over there. That's not important. This is important.
Well, what did they do? They've indoctrinated people into thinking that flat earthers were either stupid or they weren't stupid, but they're such kooks that they misunderstand the world. You know, this kind of thing. So everyone kind of views it with either, they don't view it with, most of the time, unless some flat earth actual evidence is given to them or something that debunks the globe is given to them. Unless that happens, most of the time they view flat earthers as either being like the kind of the crazy kooks, right? Who get some stuff right, but not everything because they're a bit crazy, or they're stupid. And people kind of go, ha, those are flat earthers, right? But the people at the top of the table, they're not saying that. That's why we have been suppressed since the 1800s. And the stories about us have been like, if you could, like Samuel Rowbottom, you start hearing about how he used to kill and eat his children.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so, right? That's what you hear about. You hear nothing about Charles K. Johnson because they didn't voice nothing about him because he's in recent history. So what they did is they just scrubbed him from legacy media. He did 1,000 interviews, and a load of them were on television programs. You can't find any of them. You find one thing, one small interview with a small newspaper that took place, and that's it. And it's a short little interview, and it's a written word interview, and that's it. 1,000 he was in adverts and everything. Sorry, Neil.
That's why the literature is so important. That's why the book is so important.
They're saying that about me. He did 3,000 shows, and then they just deleted him.
They could just delete your shows, but they can't just delete a book.
Indeedy.
Yeah, but there you go, right? There's a knock-on effect here as well, right? And although there is a knock-on effect, and that knock-on effect is like things like the Christian Bible, the Quran, right? Things like that, because they will then be shown to have more validity. Now, I'm not saying they're valid. I'm saying they can definitely be shown to have more validity, right? If it was admitted that the earth is flat and stationary, and obviously it had to be admitted as enclosed. Before you know it, they start having more validity. Now they don't want that. They want a situation where where you have a situation where you can choose either the Bible, Quran, Talmud, whichever, or you can choose science. Do you know what I mean? That's what they want. You can be science. And
They got
learn about
everybody fighting
astrophysics.
now.
But there you go.
I think they choose media more than anything now, the news and things like that. And the reason I'm saying that is because, I'm not going to get into conspiracies or what, but I've pointed out, the geoengineering and chemtrails and things like that. I've spoke about it to people years ago, right? And I was a conspiracy theorist, didn't know what I was talking about, even though you can look in the sky and see things are happening. But now it's been sort of, the news have said, yeah, this is what's happening. Everybody's like, yeah, this is what's happening. The people that called me crazy and didn't know what I was talking about, because the news have told them it's okay now, that's okay. So that's their Bible, the news.
It follows the same path. Ridiculed, violently opposed, and then accepted as though it was always true all along. But I'm going to round out the live show on that note. So with this, I am going to say, if you're watching on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering streams, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, though, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. So another massive thank you to all of you liked, commented, shared, subscribed, joined as a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member, joined as a Patreon, all that good stuff. I've been Nathan Oakley. Another massive thank you to Discord and G+. See you all in the next video.